The initial trend in Indian English poetry was that of neo-romanticism. Dutt and Sarojini Naidu represent this phase. But unlike Kashi Prasad Ghosh and other poets who were imitative, Dutt was the first significant poet who emerged as an innovator. Because remember, without identity and nationalism, there can be no true literature. That's why Torudat annexes tropes of Indian identity in her poetry. Although she died young, but in her ancient ballads and legends of Hindustan, she appropriates the Sanskrit tradition. She searches, she digs her root. And as you will see that in British poetry, you have very few poems on childhood, very few poems on grandfather, very few poems on lotus. So what I wish to say that in her poems on mythology, on Savitri, on Sita, and other mythological figures, Durgat shows the direction to other poets, and that's why she is now considered an innovator, the first significant poet who was not imitative. She was also backed by her knowledge of French, and she searched for her roots in the Sanskrit tradition. Because remember, in this kind of literature, where that medium is foreign, but your sensibility is Indian. So in all Commonwealth countries, they adopt a major technique, and this was inevitable in such a situation. And this technique was of what is called repossession of traditions of L1 in L2, which I call cross fertilization or creative osmosis. Those that wrote in English, but her tropes are Indian, her sensibility is Indian, and she was searching for her roots in Sanskrit literature, in mythology, in her childhood, in the lotus flower, and they are all tropes of Indian identity. That's why I said that the three factors, history, culture, language, they were given by the British. But remember, one has to assert one's identity. So this was done by Turudat. And then we, in such a lecture, I do not have time to refer to many poems, but we have a casuarina tree where childhood nostalgia is evoked. Then we have mythological stories. So this trend was taken up by Sarojini Naidu, whose poetry is known for national interrogation, appropriation of tropes of identity, Indian life, Indian culture. So that poetry was a window on Indian culture for foreign readers. So was the case of Sarojini Naidu. But both were neo-romantic. Both were working or writing under influences of the British romantic poets, Byron, Sir Walter Scott, etc. And then we had, after Sarojini Naidu, we had Manmohan Ghosh. Now today, Manmohan Ghosh was a fine poet, but he was writing in the European tradition. And in his poetry, we have lyrical poetry at its extreme. But he wrote like a European, and he was very well aware of this. He used the word denationalize, that is the word. And that's why, since he did not contribute to the making of a tradition, today he is a neglected poet. Today he is not discussed in the history of pre-independent India, although he was a very fine poet, excellent poet. Songs of Love and Death. Then this strain of appropriation of uh, native traditions was taken up by Sri Aurobindo on a large scale, on an epic scale, who who used overhead poetry, who used mantra of Sanskrit literature. That is, the tradition or the trend started by Durga was culminated in the poetry of Sri Aurobindo, where his masterpiece is Savitri, a legend and a symbol. And as you know, so long as Sri Aurobindo lived, he was a closest, and under his shadow we had neo-Aurobindo poets, numerous poets. So remember, number does not matter, and historical continuity cannot guarantee a tradition. And poets are thinkers and critics are divided. Some say that a tradition did emerge, but remember, historical continuity is not tradition. So, Gurudat, Manmohan Ghosh, Sarojini Naidu, and Sri Aurobindo, Tagore, and Harinath Chattopadhyay, they represent the older trends of neo-romanticism, mysticism, symbolism, and they write out about eternity, about soul, about spirit, about romanticism. You know, there is difference between Sarojini Naidu and Kamala Das. Sarojini Naidu glamorizes the Parda Nashin. Kamala Das does not. So, modernism means commitment to reality around your life. There were so many problems, but these pre-independent poets did not write about them. They wrote about infinite things, eternity, and that's why they were romantic in approach, rather neo-romantic. So from 1827 to 1950, the trend of neo-romanticism, mysticism, and symbolism continued. I include Tagore in this tradition because Tagore demonstrated the flexibility of the English language, that it can be tamed and made to capture the nuances of medieval bhakti poetry, Sufi mysticism, and other things. You know, these even poets of the 50s, they admit that these were exceptional poets. There were numerically a large group, so many. Nizamat Jung was there, and so many figures are there. They are there in your golden treasury of Indo-Aryan poetry, 1828 to 1965, and every poet is included. So you have to separate the grain from the chaff. After 1950, already we had a new set of influences. That is, we had the modernist influences and post-war American poets. And that's why in the 50s, there was the battle cry of revolt. The charge was that these mighty masters, although credit must be given to them, that they used the English language not as manipulators, but as organic masters who understood the nuances and inner rhythm of the English language and tamed her, tamed her to express whatever they wanted to. So, pre-independent poets did start the historical continuity, and in their appropriation of tropes of Indian culture and identity, they did contribute to the making of a tradition. But as you know that before the independence, the English language carried a colonial tag. It was the language of the colonizer. And after 1950, there was a new faith in the creative role of the English language. That's why 1950s was the decade of revolt, and there was the emergence of a new dynamics of sensibility. And as Damore, Ezekiel, and workshoppers Pilal issued his Kavita Manifesto, where he claims that the period of fireflies and neem trees is over. Romanticism comes to an end. We must write about realities around us, about hunger, about poverty, about struggle. And they rejected the earlier poets with the perversity. As my guru used to say, they rejected them with the perversity which is the young abuse the old. The earlier poets were discarded and they were not considered poets. But remember, Sri Aurobindo was a great master and he gave us the concept of overhead poetry, and he appropriated the mantric element of the Vedas and Upanishad. By this time, Mulk Raj Anand, Raja Rao, and many others, they had Indianized the English language. And this was the new fate. Now the English language, free from the colonial tag, became one of the Indian languages, and it was capable of capturing the nuances of Indian poetry. And that's why, as yes, as David Mukherjee says, the poets of the 50s are fresh, inventive, and individual. English is their natural medium of expression, not an alien tongue, but the language in which their feelings find form most satisfyingly, the language in which they make love, as Mr. Lal would say. In 1958, P. Lal founded Writers' Workshop. In 1959, he wrote an anthology along with K. Raghavan Rao, and in the introduction, they issued the manifesto. That manifesto is called Kavita Manifesto. It is something like the Images Manifesto, and it makes certain declaration for the new poets. And now the real story starts. So remember, before independence, there were a plethora of Indian poets writing in English. But today they are unheard of because they were imitative. And such poets I call India's doomed poets. Even now, we have the market is flooded with volumes of poetry. But as I said that from Henry Derozio to Samir Rafiq, The Woman in the Tree, to Sudhir Sen, and to R.K. Singh's poems and micro poems, they had an unbroken tradition. And some kind of semblance of tradition was slowly emerging. Now remember, in the 50s mood of rebellion manifested in creativity in 1960s. Nissim Eskil, Tom More were very active in the 50s, and Nissim Eskil published a collection of poems called A Time to Change. And it was a very symbolic title. It was indeed a time for Indian poets in English to change their old ways of expression, outdated mode of imitation. Remember, there was fresh life following the influence of post-war poets, the beat poets, the confessional poets, and we had the emergence of poets like Arvind Krish Mehrotra, Bharat Mata, Prayer, very innovative, very experimental. But remember, three trends emerged. Before independence, there were very limited women poets, and today they are unknown. But in 1965, Summer of Calcutta, Kamala Das emerged, and since then, Indian women have not looked back. So today we can talk of women's poetry. The early group, they talked of patriarchy, they talked of confession, they talked of loneliness, they talked of betrayal. But other women poets came, they moved beyond sigh and thigh and wrote about social problems, infanticide, feticide, betrayal, and all that. So the new Indian women poets like Nasima Aziz and Mamta Kalia, Eunice D'Souza, they provide a telling commentary on Indian life. So women have also changed, and now we have so many new poets. We have Mani Rao, we have Shanta Acharya, Devjani Chatterjee, Ranu Niyal. They provide, they use the confessional mode, but the confessional mode, somebody wants to ask, raise the hand. Who has raised the hand? So remember, the 50s exhibited the mood of rebellion, the mood of revolt, and the battle cry was break with the past. And so they broke with the past, and here was the birth of new poetry in India, modernist poetry in India, committed to reality, committed to wasted virgins, committed to communal problem, committed to reality around life. So women poets, beginning with Kamala Das. Kamala Das set the agenda for the post-colonial movement, where critique of patriarchy, Shiva, and compared with male poets, women poets are to be admired for their frankness, for their honesty. True, they have written about love, sex, loneliness, betrayal, etc. But as they moved on, other themes also emerged. And as K.K. Daruwala wrote in one of his articles, that the confessional becomes a mode of social commentary. You know, the desire for a male baby. Eunice D'Souza has written a number of poems about this. So the scenario by women poet today, so we have at least, but remember, role of anthologies has not been very positive because numbers vary. Of this I'll talk to you a little later. So this was the first trend. Indian women poets. Women had their own literary tradition, and as you know, following Mill and Elaine Showalter, there was advocacy of a separate female literary tradition. So that tradition started with Kamala Das. It developed through Mamta Kalia, and today it is flourishing in the poems of Imtiaz Dhalkar, Mani Rao, Tara Patel, Charmin D'Souza, and other bold and frank women poets who do not, hide behind metaphor and myth, but write frankly with ruthless honesty. So this ruthless honesty, this frankness is their trademark. And compared with male poets are much more liberated, and they are stating their problem for them. The personal is political. Then the second trend was that of bilingualism, because Mr. Miskeel was a Jew. He did not share the Indian past, but since he was an Indian poet, so he started annotating the truth of the context. That was his way of belonging to India. So we have tropes of Indian identity in his social criticism, in his irony, and this trend was taken up by those poets who cannot share the Indian past, like Adil Jusawala, Salim Pirezina, Geep Patel, and K.K.N. Daruwala. K.K.N. Daruwala, I consider a major poet who attracted the attention of that British ruthless critic Robert Graves. Daruwala carries forward the tradition of Nissim because they cannot appropriate Bhasha languages. They cannot use. So this is another trend of social criticism. And I call it annotation of the truth of the context. We have poems like Background Casually, very Indian poems in English, Hymns in Darkness. You know, Nissim has been called a homebound pilgrimage because he says, I cannot leave the island. I was born here. Let me find my song where I belong. So he, by religion, by his past, does not belong to India, but he develops a sense of belonging. And that's why he is different from V.S. Nepal, that declasse intellectual who is alienated from India. And Nissim wrote a very powerful essay, Nepal's India and Mine. So Ezgi's India is different from Nepal's India. Ezgi, this Nepal is a rootless intellectual, whereas this Ezgi takes his roots in India. So this is one major trend, and it has continued with Parsi poets and with other poets. Then the third trend, which is very dominant and which is very important for the formation of tradition, is that the poetry of A.K. Ramanujan, because most Indian poets are bilingual and they write in English, but they have their mother tongue. Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Odia, Marathi. So this tradition of what is called repossession of the devices of L1, their mother tongue, into L2. And A.K. Ramanujan was interpreted to be an imagist poet, but the fact of the matter is that he is using poetic devices in his English poetry from Tamil, from Telugu. He uses Vachan. Vachan was a powerful movement. So these are the broad tropes of identity. They write about their past, their tradition. They write about river in Madurai. Now this part was followed by R. Parsati in rough passage where he says, my tongue in English chase. But he repossesses so many devices from Tamil Sangam poets and all that. And then we have in 70s, I'm talking of the 60s. Then in 70s, we have the emergence of Shiv K. Kumar, Keki and Daruwala, and Jayant Mahapatra. So notice, Keki and Daruwala continues the tradition of Nissim and Shiv K. Kumar appropriates the devices of Urdu ghazal, of Urdu poetry in English poetry. It is proved there. And then we had this Jayant Mahapatra, who uses his Oriya identity, devices of Oriya language, and sometimes some people say that he is local in his references. He talks of Dan at Puri, but he is a major poet. And this tradition was carried forward by Arun Kolatkar. Jejuri. In Jejuri, there is ironic appropriation of medieval Marathi bhakti poetry and so many things. And although later on he wrote Kala Ghoda poems and others that, but he is basically known for his collection of poems Jejuri, which is a major landmark in the history of Indian English poetry. Now, after 1980, we had the new Indian poetry in English. Poetry becomes urban, and we had the Biryanization of Indian English poetry with the emergence of powerful voices like Agha Shahid Ali, who later on became a diasporic poet. Now, at this point, I would like to tell you that after 1980, we had the contribution of Muslim poets. Imtiaz Dhalkar, Tabish Khair, Aga Shahid Ali, Sayyid Amanuddin, Sayyid Amiruddin, Sayyid Ali Hamid, and now we have Anisur Rahman with his collection Earthenware, and Professor Samir Rafiq's Woman in the Tree. Now, this is a trend, and speaking at a seminar on Muslim contribution to Indian English literature as a historic effort, I divided Muslim writing into three phases. The phase of nostalgia, which is represented by Ahmad Ali, then the phase of critiquing, we have Imtiaz Dharkar, and now we have the phase of national integration, phase of assimilation. Muslim poets now do not carry their cultural bag but are assimilated with Indian life, and Sayyid Ali Hamid, Aga Shahid Ali, and Tabish Khair and Anisur Rahman represent the space of national integration. But as I said earlier, that every poet carries his cultural baggage. So tropes of Muslim identity are there, here or there. But Imtiaz Dharkar was a powerful poet. She now shifted to England. She wrote poems about Parda, about women. Very, very boldly and frankly, she critiqued the Parda and Muslim culture. And Aga Shahid Ali, Sayyid Ali Hamid, and Tabish Khan. These three triad, they represent the Muslim contribution, and they are no longer Muslim. They are words of excellence who are diasporic, who articulate, and who integrate with Indian social life. Because from time to time, they talk of minority discourse. Now, by minority discourse, other than the majority discourse. But these poets, Aga Shahid Ali, Sayyid Ali Hamid, and Tabish Khan, they write about Indian festivals. If they write about Muharram, they write about the Shara also. And these three poets represent the third phase, and this must be noted. Phase of nostalgia, phase of critiquing, and phase of national integration. Then we had the impact of postmodernism. We have diversification of genres. Nowadays, many poets are going in for haiku, and writers have started writing Urdu ghazal. We have diasporic Indian women poets and male poets. In 2022, we had a new anthology where we have Randhir Khare, Jeet Thayal, so many other poets who are writing about the dynamics of urban living, the dynamics of new life, existentialism. But women poets have continued writing about the body because the body is a powerful source of empowerment. Now you can go on and on, but so far as poetry is concerned, this is the strong point of Indian English literature. We had a plethora of words. We have some good. Then we have this politics of inclusion and exclusion and canon formation. Because there have been almost 20 anthologies, and editors are very choosy. Editors themselves are distinguished poets, so they include themselves. We have 10th, 20th century, then we have 12th, 20th. 12 poets, then 20 poets, then 50 poets. Now, no editor has so far explained the principles of inclusion and exclusion. Damore was a major poet who won the Hawthornden Prize in 1958. This British prize lay unawarded. He was a major poet. He is not included in anthologies. P. Lal, who was the high priest of Indian English poetry and who himself was a fine poet, is not included in anthologies. So we have this politics, and this is a worthy topic for doctoral research. The role of anthologies in canon formation and the politics of inclusion and exclusion, because I have on record the latest anthology is by Sudhir Sen, Converse, and from V. N. Bhushan, the Peacock Flute, down to date, there have been 30, 40 anthologies, and there is no yardstick of inclusion. You know, G.S. Sharatchand is included in one anthology, in another anthology he is missing. Then Pradeep Sen is included in one anthology, in another anthology he is. So this situation is not good for the health of Indian English poetry. But as I told you, people continue writing. Sayyid Ali Hamid is writing, R.K. Singh is writing, Ranu Niyal is writing. Ranu Niyal is a very strong new voice in Indian women's poetry. They are continuing, although Yunus D'Souza included only 11 women poets. Do you think there are only 11? There are at least 50 women poets. We have, we have Charmaine D'Souza, we have Tara Patel, we have Mani Rao, we have Shanta Acharya, and they are original voices who are voicing their feminist concerns. Mani Rao is there, who is very frank and bold. So the situation of poetry is that, you know, sometimes since I published a book in 1979, people keep on sending their volumes. So I find poetry here and there, and then I ask where. They waste their money, they waste their energy, and they land nowhere. So the corpus is very huge. There are thousands of words, but many of them do not understand the resources, the inner resources of the English language. They do not understand its rhythm, and that is why I call them India's doomed poets. There are they are only one volume poets. They have no creative stamina. They have no sustained development. So names which are included in the annals of Indian English poetry are those who are dedicated, who have creative stamina, who are capable of development. You know, once upon a time in the 60s, British Nandi was considered to be a promising poet, and his single poem, Calcutta, If You Must Exile Me, was very popular. But he went on shifting his allegiance to different traditions, to native tradition, to European tradition, and today, where is he? He is not discussed in any discussion on. We have Sompi Ranchan from Himachal Pradesh. Today he is not heard of. We have Pradeep said he is not heard of. So I have talked of major trends and techniques used by them. But as I told you, after 1980, we had new English poetry. New in the sense that it turned postmodern. They had the elements of French feminism in Indian women poets. They started writing with the woman must write woman. So they followed that dictum. Now today we have poets from all regions. Yes, one thing I forgot to tell you, there's a new development. Now we have Indian poetry English from Northeast. Very promising poets are emerging from there, who combine the local and the global and become global. This is a new development. We have significant poetry written in English from Northeast and from other regions also. And that's why Sudeep said, then one more development, the passion for ecology. Sami Rafiq's book, The Woman in the Tree, Sudeep Sen's book, and even Amitav Ghosh. He wrote Jungle Nama in verse. These three and other poets, they represent the eco-consciousness. That is, eco-criticism has entered Indian English poetry, and Sudeep Sen has written much about corona and other things. We have just a minute, I'll show you. Sudeep Sen's book, where he quotes Amitav Ghosh. Amitav Ghosh is cited by Sen, a poem. Disembodied is dedicated to him. You know Amitav Ghosh, his later fiction about his eco-criticism, ecology, and this and that. So this is also a new development. And they say the subject matter of poetry remains the same. It is the technique that matters. It is the imagery. The greatness of a poet lies in his annexation of new frontiers of imagery, and that is being done. New frontiers of imagery are being explored by our new poets, 21st century poets, because they are moving beyond tradition and all that to explore new things, universal things. Because remember, poetry may be personal, but it has to be universal. So remember, eco consciousness has entered Indian English poetry, and there are so many developments. But in a lecture like this, I cannot cover everything. But remember, you know, Caliban was taught English language. He says, "You taught me language. My profit on it. I know how to abuse you." So that phase of anti-Caliban complex is over. Now Peter Barry's model is being used. AQ, adopt, adapt, adapt. So Indians have learned the English language, they have adapted the Western forms, and now they are adept. They are writing back. They are, winning major awards. And Taliban turns foreign. Taliban is now visiting foreign countries to teach Americans and English. So this is the wonder of the language. English is a language of those who can handle it. And so now Ramu has become Albert Kamu. So now Indian poets are adept. We have Vikram Seth. And in this, the role of writer's workshop was very significant. And P. Lal, he acted something like Ezra Pound, but he has not been given his due. He was the high priest of Indian English poetry. He founded the workshop and published today's major signatures, Aga Shahid Ali, Vikram Seth, and somebody should work on his contribution. He wrote a long poem, Calcutta, which is a major statement. That's all, because I cannot give you each and every poet's name. I have given you broad trends, and you have in 2027 you will have 200 years of poetry by Indian, which is totally Indian ethos, Indian culture, and it is a model of transculturation. And even the English language is no longer English. It is not now. English is a global language. Anyone can handle the English language if he has the expertise. That's all. If you have any questions, you can ask. One more thing. We have a group called marginalized poets. Actually, here we have hegemony. We have clearing house poets, We have workshop poets, but we also have so-called mufassil poets, poets living in small cities, writing excellent poetry, but they are not allowed to enter the mainstream of Indian poetry because they are dominated by the big name, Clearing House, Delhi poets, Bombay poets, workshop poets, and that's why poets like they keep on complaining to me. We have I.K. Rizvi, we have O.P. Bhatnagar, we have we have a very significant name, R.K. Singh from Dhanbad, who is called global haiku king. His poems are very magnificent, but they do not figure in the mainstream anthology. That's why. But the problem is that whenever an editor edits an anthology, he sees to it that his poems are included in it. So, in order to promote himself, in 1974, I wanted to I wanted to publish an anthology. Then I was not a poet, so there was no question of my poems figuring there. But that project did not materialize. So I have kept a watch on the scenario. There are promising women poets. We have always, dominant culture, emergent culture, and then popular culture. We have different kinds of poets. But those names which were familiar, Keshav Malik, Aman Nath, and so they are unheard of today. They have been relegated to the limbo of oblivion. So there is also politics, politics of inclusion and exclusion. Shiv K. Kumar is a, so these are the major poets, women poets and male poets. We have so many women poets who imitated Kamala Das. Today they are nowhere. They do not figure in any discussion because writing poetry is not enough. You must write quality poems. And as I told you, here, there, where? When you take up a volume of poetry, then you search poetry. Here, there, where? Where is poetry? That's all which I wanted to share my ideas. I can go on. I have categorized marginalized poets, diasporic poets. Sudha Bhatt is there, and we have different trends. After 1980, we had poets who do not belong to any dominant trend, but Randhir Khare is there, Ranjit is there. So they write. Now Mani Rao writes naked poetry, raw, bold, naked poetry. Devjani Chatterjee is there, Shanta Acharya is there. So the scene, it will continue because poetry has been the forte. Because poetry is concerned with emotions, bhavana. Poetry, just yesterday, I was reading a statement by Mamta Kalia. Mamta Kalia says, प्यार भावना से गवर्न होता है और शादी व्यवहारिकता से. This is the difference between love and marriage. So poetry is the language of love. Poetry is language of emotion. Poetry is language of the interior landscape. Any questions? Mr. Samina Khan, you're silent.
Thank you, Professor Abidi, for that riveting lecture. The floor is open for questions. Yes. Professor Samina, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for remembering me. It was such a
बहुत
brilliant
बहुत
lecture.
आपका चेहरा देखा है.
I was attending in both modes. Online also, I joined and I was present here to listen to your
लेकिन आपका
wonderful
चेहरा
talk.
तो मैंने 10 सालों के बाद देख रहा हूँ.
जी जी बहुत मुबारकबाद. It was such a wonderful, such a brilliant, so informative talk. And I guess, and I'm not guessing rather, I can assure you that all my students were really benefited by your talk. Such a structured talk. from the beginning to the end. We've been following, and it was a wonderful talk for the teachers also. We also learned the art of conversation, the art of lecturing, and the art of presenting our ideas in such a blend manner. So it was a wonderful blend communication, I must say. And you were right in saying that poetry moves from personal or confessional to become universal. Your mention of my friend Ranu Nyal and Samir Rafiq really elated me that my friends are such great poets and they are present here. And Ranu Nyal will be addressing day after tomorrow in the conference.
So, Samina, I also published the first volume of my poems, Myth, Memory and Serenade, but I do not consider myself a poet, that's why I did not mention. But you should read my poems.
अच्छा लगेगा आप भी अपने हाइकू या जो भी है थोड़ा सा शेयर करेंगे. We would be benefited by that.
Because I have always been an objective scholar. I'm not swayed by subjectivity. I do not want to push myself.
थैंक यू अब्दी साहब. और इस
Who is
पूरे
asking about Aga Shahid Ali?
जी पोइट्री कॉन्फ्रेंस और आपकी इस टॉक के लिए मैं बस एक शेर डेडिकेट करके जा रही हूँ. मैं तो गजल सुना के अकेला ही रह गया, मैं तो गजल सुना के अकेला ही रह गया, सब लोग अपने चाहने वालों की यादों में खो गए. दैट इज व्हाट इज द आर्ट ऑफ पोइट्री.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Samina. We have with us here Professor Samir Rafiq. I'd like to call her for a few words.
Good afternoon, sir. It was such a pleasure listening to you, and I have been teaching the poetry paper. I can understand how you enrich the students by bringing in the latest trends and mentioning so many poets. I myself don't consider myself to be in that position, but thank you so much for bringing
The
me.
woman in the tree
Sir,
is a landmark. The woman in the tree is a landmark.
So I've been reading your poems on Facebook, and they are brilliant. I really wish that you had given a reference to your poetry and to your collection. And I've been marveling at your writing and your constructions in haiku, and they are just amazing. And one has to read so deeply into them to understand so many things. And I remember some you have written on Ramzan, also on Muslim issues.
Actually, I did not want to commit the sin which was committed by earlier editors, including their person and highly others. So I am an objective scholar, and as a discourse on Indian poetry, I wanted to be very unbiased, very objective, and I wanted to be, merit oriented. There are thousands, I told you, there are thousands of Indian poets. Every day, I think every third Indian is a poet in English. But what happened? One, so for women, I wrote verses since I found. When women write poetry before marriage, then marriage follows them. Their creativity is gone. So most Indian English poets are one volume. There is no sustained creative development.
Congratulations for this wonderful lecture, and I hope the students will buy the collection also, which is online. Your book.
Somebody wanted to ask about Aga Shahid. What is his inquiry? Because remember, this lecture is not meant for a visual explication of a single poet. I was realizing the broad trends and movements of Indian poetry, and you must pay attention to Kavita Manifesto, because very few people know what is Kavita Manifesto.
Okay, thank you, sir, and hope to see you again soon. And looking forward to another collection of your.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Those attending online can ask their questions in the chat box. I'd like to invite Professor Mohammad Asim Siddiqui, the Chairperson, Department of English, for a few words.
Thank you, officer. In fact, my colleagues were present.
Your आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही.
Some of my colleagues who are present here, Dr. Adiba Fayyaz, Dr. Munira T, Nazia Hussain, they'll also give brief observations about your lecture. But I want to read for these students some of Apni Saab's haiku poems. I must tell you that haiku follows certain number of syllables, and it has a particular kind of technique. It simply does not mean that you have three lines. It also has a very, say, rigid kind of syllabic structure. I'm just reading two, three haikus of Apni Saab. You'll get some idea about this poetry. Her deep black eyes, antidote to evil eye, nature's amulet. Now another. Her cherub-like face, muse to myriad poets, a devil Dasi syndrome. Then another. Fog of dementia, bright ray of her memory, photosynthesis of dream. Then another. Springing from Adam's rib, trampled under feet, she is red-haired demoness. Another. Story of Paternoster's perception of nihilism, life past election. After that, can you just briefly tell us something about the syllabic structure of a haiku? Our student will must benefit from it, and of course, I also. Just
Actually, IQ, the Japanese form of verse introduced the West by Ezra Pound, and IQ has a season word. It is written in 17 syllables, 575. It must have imagery from nature, and it is a perception of the moment, and it's not dark, heavy philosophizing. But I have tried to experiment with the haiku for other purposes also, and basically IQ focuses on season word, imagery from nature, and it is a perception of the moment. But I feel that there must be 575. Now, Professor R.K. Singh has written a haiku which is my favorite. A butterfly landed on the butterfly tattooed on her sunning back. Now, this is a true and authentic IQ. The only problem here is that butterfly has three syllables if you speak like an Englishman. Butterfly. Butter has two syllables and fly is one. So it will be 19 syllables. So one has to be very strict in 5-7 side pattern, although there are other matters also. And you have to capture the moment, the apparition of the faces in the crowd, petals on wet black mouth. Ezra Pound has written this images poem. So IQs are basically imagistic, but they use nature imagery, season word, which as you see, I have tried to experiment with the IQ for other perceptions.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to invite Professor Nazia Hassan for a few words.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
वालेकुम सलाम, कैसे हैं? देखिए
You,
जंगल जाना हमने मेंशन कर दिया अमिताभ घोष को. This is
yeah,
the of verse.
that's remarkable. You remember my association with Abidi.
Yes, I remember your book, your contribution.
It was really enlivening to hear you and to come
और
to know.
आवाज नहीं आ रही. Your
Yes, yeah. It was really a pleasure to hear to you, sir, and going down memories of English sheer poetry. Um, there are two things which come to my mind. Um, uh, it was amusing to hear that Indian women poets have been put in the
Please,
canon.
your voice not reaching me.
Your comment that Indian women poets have given only one anthology. So, and somebody like Emily Dickinson, who did not marry, could give more than 500 poems. So perhaps there is some problem with marriage in India and outside also, that poems are, there are more women poets who are fluent with their poetry before marriage and not after.
Suniti Nam Joshi, I failed to mention. She is a Canadian lesbian feminist. Writes very good uh, French feminist poems.
I also wanted to know, sir, that if there is some reason that in British literature, in the history of British literature, we come to hear of many, very few poets, female poets writing in the beginning. But when it comes to India, there are more women writing poetry rather
Yes.
than those.
Because the reason is that, listen to me, the reason is that they say marginality, as Edward Said says, marginality is a source of creativity and repression leads to creativity. And in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, women have been repressed by patriarchy. So they are having a kind of creative release of their feminist sensibility in their poems. This is one reason. Because when you compare the condition of women in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So repression leads to creativity. That is true of Dalit writers also, and that is true of women writers.
That's a good analysis of the situation. We are really much enlightened by listening to you, sir. It was a pleasure, and hoping to hear more from you on various.
Yes, because in a lecture, you are very limited in your class. Okay,
Thank you very much, sir.
welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
If there are any questions, you may please ask. There is a question in the chat box that says, could you please suggest some contemporary texts on Aga Shahid Ali poetry?
He wants texts written on Aga Shahid Ali or his collections. Aga Shahid Ali wrote about Begum Akhtar. But Aga Shahid Ali can be compared with Tabish Khair and Sayyid Ali Hamid because all of them are writing ghazals in English. Okay?
Sir, either will do. Either of these suggestions will do, sir.
Yes?
Sir, either of these suggestions will do.
Yes, Aga Shahid Ali is very established known. Sayyid Ali Hamid is also established name and Tabish Khair is already very established. So you can take up for comparative study, although much work has been done. Much work has been done, so you can take up some new poets Ranjit Hoskode, Jeet Thayar, and other women poets also you can take up. Aga Shahid Ali is a major writer and he wrote whatever he wanted to write. He is a major voice. Begum Akhtar, I don't know about Begum Akhtar. Aga Shahid Ali is an Indian poet in English. Begum Akhtar was a ghazal singer. So don't take up obscure topics for research.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Um, First of all, on behalf of the Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University, I, Atiba Fayaz, an assistant professor here, would like to propose the vote of thanks. But before I set foot on the formal vote of thanks, let me remind everyone that we had the opportunity to listen to Abidi sir in the last conference during the same pre-conference event, where he spoke extensively on Eliot and his ideas of poetry. Today, we had the fortune to listen to him talk in detail about Indian English poetry. I am mesmerized by the fact as to how he structured his lecture. He began by tracing the historical continuity from beginning from colonial poetry written in India to the formation of new literature, finally moving to post-colonial poetry, and now that we have moved to the decolonialization phase. I'm also impressed by the fact that he basically highlighted two very important aspects of Indian English poetry, which are imitating during the first few years and then claiming and being the proud owners of the idea of Indianness, which started getting reflected in the poems. I am reminded of the stark difference that one can point out from Henry Desrosiers's The Harp of India and Sarojini Naidu's, for example, The Village Song. So Sir has very poignantly pointed these things out, and he has also spoken about the parameters of history, culture, and language. And not just that, he actually brought to our notice all the major canonical writers, Indian English poets, beginning from Desrosiers, of course, and then highlighting on Toru Dutt, because that is where our conference begins, to coming as closer to Samir Rafiq ma'am and Amitav Ghosh's book. And I'm very impressed by the fact that he has also come up with few names which we are going to listen to in the coming days. The conference is not too very far off. The wait is soon going to be over. And we are going to listen to these people in person, because this conference is going to be the first in-person conference post-pandemic. So I'm very delighted to have you here, sir. I'm also equally impressed by the fact that you ended your lecture by speaking about community, religion, and gender, and establishing the link between these three. I'm also willing to highlight the fact that you pertinently pointed out Shakespeare's The Tempest, the character Caliban from Shakespeare's The Tempest, to highlight the importance of language and how language can be exploited either ways. So thank you so much, sir. And
Thanks.
we go away from here with several takeaways, one of which could be, in my mind, is to adopt, adapt, and execute as an Indian English poet. So we started this lecture with listening to Abidi sir as a critic, but because of Asim sir, we had the opportunity to listen to his lines, and we also get to get a few glimpses of Abidi sir as a poet. So I'm very thankful to you, sir, and I look forward to having you in another such academic gathering. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm also thankful to our organizing secretary of the conference, Professor Asim Siddiqui, to have come up with such an idea, to have organized a pre-conference event, because it is very important to set the tone, and we have actually set the tone in place. I'm also thankful to all the teachers of the department who have joined us in person. Professor Sabina ma'am, Professor Nazia ma'am, Rubina ma'am, Fazia ma'am, Rashid sir, and a lot of other teachers who have now moved because of their classes. And I'm also thankful to the audience sitting here, students of MA, research, and the students who have joined in to the online mode. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the other side of the weekend in the main event. Thank you.